Good morning, and welcome to another episode, another session, another conversation as we gather for her. I'm Charlene Sinjenko, and I'm the founder and CEO of Powerhouse. We are an impact media platform. We're an organization that does just this, intentionally gathers for the sharing and the collection of collective wisdom and the coming together to build our power as women leaders for impact. I want to welcome each of you here this morning. I want to introduce you to my co-host, Tina Overbury. And I'll just tell you a little bit about Tina. She is a core communications specialist, and she works closely with individuals and organizations who feel called. She's a storyteller, a performer, and a professional listener who works with narrative and story structure as a vehicle for human connection. Good morning, Tina.
Good morning. Good morning.
And Tina and I are...
I just love being here. It's Monday morning.
Oh, it's such a great morning. Tina and I are on our own today, but I will tell you just briefly about our co-hosts. We are usually joined by the amazing, the energetic, the impactful, and the passionate Christina Benti. She's not able to be with us live today, but Christina is a regular co-host of ours, and she's a retired politician. She's a jazz singer, and she's the owner of Strategic Leadership Solutions, which is an organization that is designed to cultivate a culture of excellence in leadership and governance. So you can imagine she brings some really unique perspectives and energy to our conversations. And then finally, I just want to recognize my Indigenous sister, Sharon Marshall, who's our graphic recorder. She is an Indigenous entrepreneur and the founder of Diva Training and Staffing Solutions. Sharon is not able to be with us live today, but she will be listening to the conversation closely, and she brings her gifts in graphic recording as we capture this conversation with a follow-up article and recording and graphic recording and ripple out the impact from there. And before I introduce our special guest today, I just want to recognize that I am lucky enough to be joining you this morning from the traditional lands of the Squamish First Nation. And I live in Gibsons, BC on the beautiful Sunshine Coast. And I just ask you to just reflect for a moment and acknowledge the lands on which you call home in gratitude. Excited to introduce you to our special guest today. Joining us from the UK, from Manchester, is Dr. Kasia Wilk. And Kasia is a chartered counseling psychologist. She's a transformation coach, speaker, and founder of Choice Point Productions. And she's the producer of an upcoming movie called Unseen Scars, which we'll be talking about today. Good morning, Kasia. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just really honored to be here today and to be joining, all of you today. And I see, such beautiful faces. So thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be part of this conversation.
Thanks for being here. We're excited to have you here. We've been gathering this month under the theme with the intention of holding and creating space for a conversation series around the artistry of impact. And just listening as to what comes up, what comes up around that theme, the artistry of impact, that we're meant to connect about right now. What's the story around that? And we've had a couple of great conversations so far leading into today's conversation. And I'm wondering, Kasia, if we could start just with kind of a broad brushstroke in terms of introduction. How does that phrase resonate for you, the artistry of impact? And like, what does that say to you? And why do you think it's important right now to be talking about it?
It's a beautiful phrase, I think, because it is impact. I believe there's an artistry to it. I think we're living in very interesting times where the opportunity for impact from everyone is available. And yeah, I think these are times when collectively we can all step into that role and, be change makers, make an impact in the world in our own unique way. And so I think it's, I know I've been called to step into that role myself, and it's been quite a journey. And I feel like for everyone, if we step into how it's calling us, then I think we can really be able to do amazing things in this world. So yeah, it's definitely calling us, I think, at this time.
Tina, I'm wondering if you have any reflections, like you've been a part of all of our conversations so far, obviously, but specifically around the last two, and then pulling the thread into this one. Curious if anything's coming up for you this morning around that phrase, the artistry of impact.
Yeah. When I think about the different conversations we've had and Kasia, I'm so intrigued by you because your presence is very different. And when I think about art that way, that's what I notice is, Naomi McNichol-Jones last week, her presence was very, forward. And your presence to me, just speaking for me, is it's very wide. And like, it's like consciousness, right? And so when I think of artistry for impact and what you just said about how it's calling us, it's that recognition that each of us are very, very unique in how we create impact, and the artistry of that, of how it all intersects. And we don't get to be in charge of how it all connects. We can just bring our piece. So that, to me, that's just in the noticing of, by calling it Artistry of Impact this month, the different individuals that have been programmed in, really seeing the uniqueness of each voice. That's what is alive for me.
I encourage our guests this morning who are on the call, especially those that have been here last week or maybe the first 2 weeks of this month, to also reflect to us, what is the artistry of impact? What's coming up for you around that? And just before we jump into our second question with Kasia, I'll just reflect back that a couple of things come to mind for me. And one is when you're embarking on a creative project, like a painting. And trust me, there's better artists on this call than I. But when you start on a painting, you don't exactly know how it might transpire. You have a vision, but you're not trying to control that flow of creativity and innovation and what can come as you access that, that innate ability. Or when you're part of an orchestra, you know what you want the experience of a performance to be like, and what you might bring to it, which speaks to the collective action, what you might bring to part of collective consciousness as a piece, one player in an orchestra. But what might be possible if we each came with our instrument tuned up, practiced up, ready for showtime, as part of as part of an incredible orchestra. But we don't often bring that conversation into the creation of impact. and how we might play together at a really high level. And one thing I love about bringing Kasia to the conversation today is the commitment to a project that allows for that to happen. And what I mean by that is, I'll just kind of jump into our second question. Bringing something like collective consciousness and raising of collective consciousness, how you actually do that in the world. And so my second question to Kasia is, you're a psychologist, you're a practicing psychologist and counselor, you've got a thriving practice, you know, in the UK, what on earth, you know, called you to start a productions company and to embark on creating a film?
Yes, I love that question, because I I didn't plan for myself to be running a production company when I was, you know, on the journey in training to be a psychologist. So I actually have been surprised myself. If you asked me, you know, 10 years ago, if I would be doing what I'm doing now, I would say, no way. You know, I had no idea that I'd be doing this, but I went through an interesting process while I began working with clients. And what I noticed was that I was able to facilitate this process of transformation for clients, which was really, really powerful. And it was all really to do with bringing in that self-awareness that really supports us in being able to make better choices in life. Because essentially, anyone that comes to create change and transformation in their life is looking for that awareness mostly. Like, why is it that I'm stuck? Why is it that I can't move forward in my life? And I began to see that it was such a powerful process for my clients to just have that self-awareness that actually I have this power to completely transform my life just by being aware of the choices that I'm making and just noticing, where do they come from? You know, do they come from past trauma, past pain? Is anger fueling some of my choices? Is it fear that's driving what I do? And so it's this beautiful discovery that, you know, a journey that we go on to bring in that self-awareness and then to provide the opportunity to make different choices that come from courage, from faith, from love, and really recognizing that actually all the power is within us to do that, no matter what's going on in our external circumstances. And so I got really inspired to just start thinking about, this is such a powerful process, but yet so many people won't access this process because they don't have the awareness to even know that they're living inside a reality that maybe isn't serving them, and they're co-creating that reality. So I began to sort of just ask myself, what could be a bigger platform to maybe just reach out and bring in that level of self-awareness into the world, where if everybody could understand, like, I can completely change my reality based on making different choices in my life, and I don't have to be on autopilot doing what I've always done because of past programming, then we could create such huge transformation in the world. And so I had no idea how to do that, but I just began to ponder what might be a platform to do that. And then I sort of got this vision in a meditation one day of looking at film, because film is something that most of us access, and it's something that can create that self-awareness if it's used in a way that is not just to entertain, but it's also there to educate and empower people. So I started thinking, okay, this could be really interesting. We could create maybe films that are slightly different, maybe even give people sort of this experience of being a choice maker in the film. So my sort of original vision was to create interactive films and just to have two different endings and really kind of put the viewer in the driver's seat. But I wasn't really sure where to begin. You know, I thought to myself, like, I'm a psychologist, I'm not a filmmaker. This is a crazy idea. What am I, you know, thinking about? But then it was a few years ago that I had sort of a series of events that happened that really pushed me just to take the leap. And I just felt like this was, you know, something bigger than me that was saying, like, the time is now. And one of those first experiences was I lost my dad quite suddenly in 2017, and it was really unexpected. And just that process of grief that I was going through really woke me up to the fact that, you know, our time is quite short. Like, we never know how much time we actually have here. And it just made me realize that if there is something that I'm thinking about doing, maybe I shouldn't wait 10 years, but maybe I should just do it now. And then, of course, the other thing that happened was I'm in Manchester, and we had the terror attack here at the big Ariana Grande concert. And that was incredibly traumatic, I think, for everyone that lives in Manchester, because there was just such a collective grief that was happening. And I worked with some of the victims as well that were part of that experience. And it really also got me questioning about what was going on for that young man that made that choice to cause so much destruction. And of course, again, it got me thinking that young man was probably very vulnerable and was coming from a place of probably pain or anger or fear, because that's what happens when you're hurting on the inside. You're going to go out and you're most likely going to hurt other people. And so I thought, he didn't maybe have the awareness or the tools to really know that he could have made other choices. So I think it really just began to dawn on me that there is such power to bring in that awareness for people to see that actually anytime we're going through something internally and we feel like, you know, there is no way out, there is always another way out. There's another option, there's another choice. And so, yeah, that's when I thought, okay, so this is the time to do it. And I made the choice to commit to it shortly after that experience. And it's incredible what happens when you just make the choice and commit to it without even knowing where you're going to begin or how it's going to happen, because you just end up finding those synchronicities that begin to show up, and the right people, you know, begin to join you. And that's what this process has been like for me. It's been a very synchronistic process where I just ended up meeting the right people at the right time, who began to join me in this vision, join me in this project. And now we're co-creating something that's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Amazing.
And, you know, we're all collectively choosing courage every day as well, because we are stepping into the unknown and doing something that is slightly different than traditional filmmaking. So in a nutshell, that's
I just wanted to reflect a couple of things back and ask Tina to do the same. And it's kind of about the bigger conversation of the artistry of impact, you know, like the tracing the nuggets that are coming through. What I heard, the three things really came out for me beyond the story, beyond the narrative of what you're up to. And the first one was you were called by something bigger than you. And the message very clearly was the time is now. So I'm just going to plant that here. The second thing that came out for me was you and your colleagues in this project choose courage every day. That's the second nugget that really landed. And then the third was you're embarking on something different. you're embarking on something that you feel is quite different. And I think those three things are actually quite powerful. So I'm just going to kind of leave that here in this space. Tina, I'm wondering from that amazing, share, what came up for you?
There's three things that came up for me, similar to you. Kasia, for you, what I want you to know is when you said beautiful discovery, it's like my whole room lit up. It just went, and I went, oh my gosh, is that the name of her film? I don't know. I'm not, I just want you to know that I was like, it's like, it just went, oh, my whole room lit up. And then from a tracking lens, from all the different conversations that we've had, I couldn't help but notice unexpected, that it seems to be like that's a common thread through every conversation that we've had. And I would love to hear more about that state of being, of unexpected in your experience, because I think as I'm listening for the wisdom, like the message that we're all, it's all like what's the universe trying to say to us today? Not what's Kasia trying to say, what's Shar trying to say, but what's kind of trying to be said. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that. And then the third piece that was a question for me was, as we talk about the artistry of impact, and we move out of a dominance model of the world where we say, I know, and we transition into, I don't know, I'm going to follow. I was like, oh my gosh, how does a therapist make a film about a process where there's no narrative driving, because that's telling? How do we create an experience? And I was like, whoa. And so I'm really hungry and curious for what you're discovering in this process. I'm just really hungry for that. Yeah. So there's two pieces. I'd love to hear about unexpected and what you're discovering when you stop telling and start creating experiences, because that's art too. Really curious what's happening for you there.
Yes. So, and it's really inspiring for me to hear you share those things as well, because I absolutely wholeheartedly feel like the unexpected is also where the magic is. So I personally feel like if I knew every single thing that was going to happen on this journey, it would take away some of the magic, I think, of just surrendering to what I believe just wants to come into the world. And I feel like, okay, I'm a part of this co-creation. I've got the vision, and now there's other people that are joining me in this vision, and we are allowing that to unfold in a way where we can surrender to living in that uncertainty and that unexpectedness, bit by bit, and just see, where is this going to take us? How big is this going to get? What really is the impact that wants to be made through this vision that we're creating? And that, I find, allows me to also have faith and trust, and not kind of let my ego try and be like, I want to control this and it has to look like this, because then it gets very it can get very stressful, and it can get very it just feels like the intention then sort of doesn't feel very meaningful. So this process of being with the unexpected, for me, ties into like a surrendering to something bigger than myself. And that process, I think, again, I share this because I think for everyone, I think that's called to something that wants to come through you. I think this process is there. It's that surrendering process and being open to the unexpected, being open to the magic. And then sometimes it's actually better than what you think it's going to be. Like you'll have someone join you and you're like, I had no idea that you were going to join this project, but that's way better than I thought it would be. So, so that for me is an important piece of it.
A quote that I heard this week that this brings up for me was, you can't strategize inspiration, because as soon as you start to try to do that, you're dangerously limiting the possible of infinite possibility. Because I think it goes back into what I believe, that with up here, we access about 15% of what is really possible. If we're willing to play in the unexpected, in the magic that sits at the periphery, by choosing to be brave and courageous every day, that's the artistry of impact, in my opinion. Yeah, that's I'm curious. I want to get into or tie into this conversation. I'd love to weave in Naomi's quote from last week. She was quite clear on her position that in order to shift society, to shift humanity and the trajectory we're on, we actually have to shift the story. And I'm curious of, your thoughts on that, and how that ties into what we're chatting about now with the unexpected and allowing things to unfold.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a, I loved Naomi's talk last week, because I think that I'm just venturing into the film industry, but I know from that psychological perspective of what I get to witness when I work with people on a day-to-day, and really hear like the deepest, darkest things that go on for them, and the privilege I think that comes with witnessing them in that way. There's so much opportunity to be able to bring those stories onto the film platform. And again, when it comes to how do stories influence us, they absolutely influence us. Even when we are consuming, we do it so automatically. Like if we watch the news every day, we're consuming negative stories. I mean, that's the reality, isn't it? We're putting that into our consciousness, and we're not aware over time how those kinds of messages, when you repeat them over and over and over again, and you kind of have that sort of narrative, they begin to form a particular subconscious belief about the world, about what we think is possible, about our assumptions, so like stories are really powerful, and film, I think, is such a powerful platform, because when we watch films, they absolutely influence us, whether we're aware of it or not. And I think most of the time we're not aware of it. So we can be consuming content that isn't actually serving us, isn't making us feel more empowered, or feeling, like we can do anything we want in our lives. A lot of times there's like content that makes us feel fearful, or makes us feel that the world is a dangerous place, or we can't trust people, or if you watch content that's quite violent, I think there's a lot of films that are still promoting lots of violence, and then sort of seen as something that just happens, and there's a hero, the hero like wins, so all these things do influence, especially I think I can definitely see with the younger generation that are there's more vulnerability there to being influenced by these things, because they're still developing their sense of who they are and their identity. But there is an influence definitely with what we're consuming, and that's why I've become, over time, when I began to realize this, I thought, okay, I'm going to be very aware of like the content I'm consuming, even now in the pandemic that we're in. I think we have to be, mindful of how much news we're consuming, because it can be very, very negative, and then it begins to influence how you feel, and how you feel affects how you show up in the world, how you respond to things. And it's just putting those pieces together. It's knowing that actually, why can't we use these platforms to positively influence consciousness, to raise our consciousness, to really know that if we consume positive messages over time, that's also going to be influencing our sense of feeling safe in the world, our sense of knowing that everything's going to be okay, that we can do anything we choose to do in the world. So many things can change. So I feel really passionate about this, because I just can see the opportunity there. And a lot of times we're just consuming things that have always been there, and it's just kind of like, well, this is just the way it is. Like, news is just negative news, and that's, even though it's only like, it's a fraction, it's a small percentage of stories that are being shared, and there's so much other good stuff that happens. But if you only see the bad stuff, then you just begin believing that maybe the world is like that, and I really should panic, and I should be fearful, and it's just not true. So
Can I ask a question? What I am really jazzed about is more therapists on the platform, because what therapists know how to do is hold complexity. And from my own lens, what I can't help but notice as well, in every conversation that Gather for Her has had, including the Fire Circle, the theme of grief has been very present. And when I think about your film, Unseen Scars, there's like, therapists are the holders, the sacred holders of complexity. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are about telling those stories of complexity. So it's not violence, and it's not what I call sunshine, rainbows, and lollipops, but it's like, so there's more permission to bring our whole selves to the table and know that we're safe in that grief or whatever's up. I mean, I have one of my children really walks with anger, and to support him to go, you know what, you came into the world that way. And so how do we create safety for you? Like, I just use that as an example. Curious your thoughts about that complexity.
Yes, I think you've nailed it on the head. It is so much about understanding what it means to be human, and absolutely knowing that that complexity and suffering, part of being human. It's being okay sometimes with not being okay, and finding ways to navigate those darker places that are bringing us back to wholeness and that are empowering. Because so much of the time we're not taught, we don't always have the tools of, how do I cope with this thing I'm going through in life? I don't know what to do. So I'll just go to a coping strategy that isn't very helpful. And our films that we're creating at the moment, Unseen Scars, is really actually speaking into that, is speaking into when we carry unseen scars, when we have trauma, how do we navigate that? How do we make choices that help our recovery from those places in a way that feels empowering, and also doesn't make us feel less than when we're in those places? It doesn't stigmatize us, because that is a big part of what unfortunately is still out there in the world, that it's changing now, but that kind of stigma and that shame of like, I don't want to ask for support. I want to tell people that I'm going through this, because it's going to make me look weak. It's going to make me look like I can't handle this. And that fear of that judgment, that's such a collective thing that I think everyone has to a certain degree. And that's a conversation that we really want to have with this film, to start changing that. Our film is particularly looking at, it's a story of a military veteran that comes home from his experiences at war and really struggles to deal with what he's experienced and reintegrate back into society. He doesn't know what to do with his unseen scars, his inner wounds, and makes not very great choices in how to cope with that in the beginning, and then goes through this process of learning how to navigate that, how to make more empowering choices. But it really just speaks very powerfully to what you're saying, Tina, about understanding that the first thing is just even accepting that this is part of being human, and we don't have to feel ashamed for, you know, having these insecurities, these fears, these wounds that we have. And it can be so liberating to know that, you know, that's a part of being human, and absolutely you can recover from those places, and you're not a bad human being for having those things.
Mm-hmm. Kasia, I'd love to ask you a few questions about the process and the logistics of being a filmmaker. So we've talked a lot about the concept and the background and the impact of the film, but actually we actually want to talk about what that feels like on the ground. We had a question, you know, when will the film be released? I want to actually turn to the process that you're in as a filmmaker, and maybe, you know, what surprised you about the process, or what's right in front of you. Wherever that question takes you, I'd love to turn more to the technical part of it now.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're in the process now of being in pre-production, early pre-production. We're in the finance seeking stage, which is always the hardest part of making a film. It's finding the money to get it off the ground. So we're offering that opportunity, obviously, to anyone that wants to invest in this film, that opportunity is there. Also, for anyone that wants to help us find investors to make the film, we have another opportunity available to offer a percentage of commission off of whatever investment is brought in. So we really want to create a movement and get people involved, but it's a step-by-step process for me. I am learning every day the various challenges that come with making a film, and just how important it is to have the right team of people around you. So my partner in crime is my writer and director, Carl McKenzie, who together, he wrote the script, and we've sort of pieced it together. And he's now sort of my wingman in tackling sort of the day-to-day decisions that come with just the different stages of film production. So the finance seeking stage is one of the most important pieces. And there's also the element of learning how can this film be marketable. So learning about what sells a film, how do you distribute it, what kinds of things do you need to look out for in terms of casting. So it's a lot to take on board, but we have a few actors attached. We are partnering with a charity as well called Combat Stress, which is the UK charity to support veterans with mental health issues. So a portion of the film sales will go towards supporting them. And we are, just in the process right now of trying to put a schedule together. It's hard with the coronavirus to know when we can actually go into production, but the plan is to go in to production later this year and to have the film be released next year, and then to disseminate it obviously as wide as we can, and to make it be quite an involved process. So we're going to do a cinema run across military towns in the UK and do a Q&A panel at every cinema run to get people involved and have those conversations. And we'll be also looking to just see, how much can we begin to talk about the themes in the film and begin to change some of the paradigms that exist around seeking support, really be able to create some change as well within not just the military community, but even, for men who sometimes struggle to come forth and ask for support, because they feel quite isolated and feel like I'm not man enough if I, show my what I'm struggling with. So all those things are part of the process. But in terms of tangible things, where finance is where we're at the moment, and I'm sort of working hard on that process while other people on my team are doing their bits. Yeah, every day.
Awesome. Well, I know when we break into our wisdom circle, we'll probably have some more specific questions about that. Tina, I know with your film background, I'm curious if you have any thoughts or questions that come up for you.
The only thing that comes to mind actually was, I remember my DP said to me in my second short film, long time ago, but he said to me, he said, you know what? It's a good thing you didn't go to film school. Because if you went to film school, you would not be asking me to do the things that you're asking me to do. And to me, that's what artistry is. And I think what I've noticed is it's really important. It's really important to take the wisdom of the structures that exist and not necessarily give in to them, but learn from them. And I think we're in this beautiful spot to say, yes, film has always been done like this, and there's development, pre-production, production, post-production, distribution. There's all that, and there's a whole structure there, and it's also like throw it all up in the air, and that's actually how it's going to get done. And yet there's wisdom, like not to throw out the wisdom of each of those pieces. So that's the only thing that comes to mind. I remember a film director said to me, he asked me if I'd read screenwriting, Sid Field's screenwriting. I'm like, no, I don't want anybody messing with my story. And he's like, listen, you got to know the rules if you're going to break them. And I loved that. So again, it's not I just kudos to you, and we're all here to support you in where you're going.
Yeah, I reflect one comment, and then I have a really specific question for Kasia. Not to put you on the spot, but it's a question that I would ask any of the women if we were having coffee together. In fact, it's a question I love so much. My comment is, I know with all of who I am that we are in the right space for transformative change at a global level. And so I want to commend you publicly for your courage. I'm a huge observer. I'm a bit of a Nancy Drew. I'm always looking for clues. I'm always watching. And if impact media was not the place for the greatest change, then the Obamas would not be in this space with a productions company. And Hillary Clinton and her daughter would not be in this space with a productions company. Oprah Winfrey would not have dedicated her entire life to this space and made the impact that she has. And now it's rippling from there. So I start with a statement that is what I know for sure is we are in the right space to create change and to help other women and men create the change that they're looking to create with the gifts they have. My question is, without naming specifically, like I'm not looking for a name, but if there was one person or opportunity that you could get in front of in the next 90 to 180 days that would most like shift the trajectory or up level, the impact you're looking to make, who would an example of that person be, in case anyone at our periphery is like, you know what, I've got the perfect person for Kasia to speak with, or something like that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, beautiful question.
Nothing like on the spot.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think, well, what comes up for me right when you say that is it's finding it's impact investors. It's people that want to make an impact in the world. And I know there's people that have the resources and want to make an impact with those resources, but maybe don't know where to channel it. Like, where do I put my resources, to which projects? And I think that if we can find those people when it comes to impact media and be able to put these projects that are out to make a difference in the world through elevating consciousness, through creating stories that really matter, and we sort of get them on board to be like, we need you to join us in this movement. This is such an opportunity to collectively create that change, because everyone's got different pieces of the puzzle. And I think you're right that sometimes some people, have some people have the vision, other people have the manpower and the skills, and then other people have maybe the financial resources to get that project going. And so for us, I think that's where we're really at now, is finding people that have the resources, that really want to make an impact with those resources. They want to be part of leading change with us. And still getting a good return on their investment, but not just making a profit. It's making a profit and being able to be a part of change, transformation. So yeah, I would say that would be amazing if we can.
Can I speak some life into your revenue or your finances? Do you have just a go-to-camera amount of money that you're trying to raise?
Yes.
We have a whole big budget that includes everything else, but just to get to camera, do you have anything there that you could say, I'm speaking this out?
Yes, we do have a budget, and it has increased over time because we want this film to be the best it can be. And right now it sits at just over £500,000 to get this film off the ground. So it's not big budget, but it's not super small budget. It's in that sort of middle place, but that's where we're at.
Well, I want to bring our circle to a close officially. I want to thank you for reflecting on the journey and the impact that you're looking to make through the journey, the process. And I want to thank the women that are part of this call today live for witnessing what you're up to in the world. I think as we all bring our energy to, your really clear intention, the idea that we all bring our energy, our connections, our power, that's a big part of how we gather for her and how we actually change the trajectory for her coming up after us as well. I think that, I just think that's where real power, a new source of power comes to us. And so I want to thank you for joining us today. We're going to now be flipping it more into an interactive part of the session.